Can I just say that really made my Yontiv, and I don't think we've ever had this many kids here on first day of Pesach, so this is wonderful. I guess the schools are closed today. Fantastic. Last night, if you were awake enough and zealous enough to make it all the way to the end of the Seder, then of course you sang the two great concluding songs of Pesach, Echad Miodea and of course Chad Gadya. Chad Gadya is a late addition to the Passover liturgy. It first appeared in a printed Haggadah in Prague in 1590, making it the most recent addition to our traditional Pesach liturgy. But although it only appears in Haggadot starting in the 16th century, there is a much earlier manuscript version of Chad Gadya from France in the 14th century. And in that version, the cat doesn't eat the goat, but rather a dog eats the goat, which of course really makes much more sense if you think about it. And Chad Gadya seems to be a simple, whimsical folk song, almost like a nursery rhyme, and you all know it very well. A goat is eaten by a cat, the cat is bitten by a dog, the dog is beaten by a stick, etc., until finally the song culminates in the appearance of the angel of death, and ultimately with God. And although it seems like a simple song, there really is great depth just beneath the surface. Chad Gadya is a song about the endless cycle of violence, vengeance, and retaliation that we, both humanity broadly speaking and the Jewish people specifically, have been subjected to and have lived through for thousands of years. And the most famous interpretation of Chad Gadya tells us that the goat functions as a stand-in for the Jewish people. Each verse represents one of our enemies who has sought to destroy us throughout history. The cat is Assyria, the dog is Babylonia, the stick is Persia, the fire is the Greeks, the water is Rome, the ox is Islam, the butcher is the Crusaders, and the angel of death is the Ottoman Empire. Each verse corresponds to a different dark and terrible chapter in Jewish history, and each character in the song represents one of the great historic enemies of the Jewish people, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans. As Chad Gadya suggests, the Jewish people are caught in what seems to be an endless cycle of hatred, violence, and destruction. And I've been thinking a great deal about Chad Gadya this year, more than I've ever really thought about it before in the weeks leading up to Pesach, because this year, Chad Gadya really seems more relevant than it has ever been before. For the past 6 months, it feels as if we have been living through the verses of Chad Gadya, except this time the verses don't correspond to the enemies of Jewish history. They correspond to the enemies of our Jewish present. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iran is the angel of death. And as much as it pains me to say it, I would also include, tragically and unfortunately, I would include the student protesters at Columbia University, my alma mater, and at Yale as part of that list. As I'm sure you are all well aware, over the past week, protesters have overtaken the campuses at both Columbia and Yale universities, two of our most prestigious academic institutions. Ivy League schools who pride themselves not only on their academic excellence, but who also envision themselves as moral exemplars for the world. And yet, on Columbia's campus this past week, student protesters were openly and proudly declaring their love of Hamas. They heckled Jewish students as they walked to class, screaming at them to go back to Poland. They passionately chanted that Tel Aviv should be burned to the ground. And things got so tense this past week that on Sunday, the Orthodox Hillel rabbi at Columbia sent out a letter urging all Jewish students to finish the semester from home because he feels that it is no longer safe for them to be on campus. And just yesterday, the president of Columbia canceled classes for the day because she could not ensure the safety of her Jewish students. Those protesters are enemies of the Jewish people, and they too are worthy of their own verse in Chad Gadya. But as dark as the chain of events in Chad Gadya may be, the conclusion of the song is deeply infused with hope. Just when it seems as if all is lost, a greater, more powerful force emerges to counteract the destruction. God vanquishes the angel of death. Goodness ultimately triumphs over evil, and we are taught that even in the face of unfathomable darkness, there is always the potential for light to prevail. As both Chad Gadya and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. teach us, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And isn't that really the ultimate message of Pesach? Our ancestors suffered in servitude for hundreds of years, and just when it seemed as if all hope was lost, that's the moment when redemption arrived. Yes, it takes time, but the Jewish people are always moving mechoshech leor, me'avdut lecherut, from darkness to light, from slavery to freedom. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory once wrote of Chad Gadya, I find it unbelievably moving that a people that has known so much suffering can summon the moral courage to end this evening of Jewish history on a supreme note of hope and write it into the hearts of its children in the form of a nursery rhyme, a song. For what we give our children on this night of nights is something more and greater than the bread of oppression and the taste of Jewish tears. It is a faith that in this world, with all of its violence and cruelty, we can create moments of redemption. No one has risked and suffered more for a slender hope, but no hope has lifted a people higher and led it time and again to greatness. So we end the Seder with a prayer and with the conviction. The prayer, God of life, help us to win a victory over the forces of death, and the conviction that by refusing to accept the world as it is, together we can start to make the world as it ought to be. Chag Sameach.